Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 3 of IDL Debating Marathon. Today, we are going to learn as to how we are supposed to make arguments and what are the different parts of an argument. So arguments are inherently part of your body. I did tell you as to what arguments are supposed to consist. It has to have assertion, reasoning, and example. Reasoning is also called as analysis or justification. So they are similar words. Don't get confused here. So assertion, reasoning, and example. But before I actually tell you what all of it is, if you ever in a debate, I think most of you all have done conventional form of debate and other forms of debates, which is, I think you should probably know about it. So whenever you say, I have proved my point, why do you say so that you've proved your point? What do you actively do in order to prove your point or claim? Okay, Shrishti.
Give a reason to it.
Okay, you give a reason to it. Okay. What do you actually call a reason?
My analysis or justification.
Okay, you give a justification to what you're saying. Okay. Any other things? Nothing.
You
So you
give
basically
examples that support your reason or argument.
Yeah, evidences for that.
Okay, you give evidence for that. I think that's pretty much it. I think most of the times what we end up doing is just giving examples of like, hey, I think according to this statistic or this survey, this was being proved, and therefore whatever I'm saying right now is actually true, right? I think it's a combination of both. Whenever we have WSTC or like even parliamentary debates, you're supposed to first have reasoning and then have examples. Examples are still like not that important in an argument insofar as you don't have an example, but you still have a really good reasoning. The argument still counts. So the most important is reasoning and then your example. But obviously assertions are just like headings and as to what you're trying to prove in the first place. So these are the three things you're supposed to have in order to just have an argument. But even apart from that, you have one thing called as impact. So what is the impact of your argument? Why is your argument more important, etc., etc. But impact is more than supplementary of an argument. So I won't call it as an inherent part of an argument. I'm going to deal with like each one of it separately, so don't get confused. So let's start with assertion then. Assertion is basically the heading of your claim and the nutshell of the argument, which means that what exactly are you trying to prove? And it's just like one liner of what you want to prove. So it's just heading. So you know how like in your essays, you're supposed to just like have like just titles of what exactly the paragraph is supposed to have. So you just give more, like you just analyze the heading in your essays. In your paragraphs, that's what it is. So it's just the headings. Now this heading is supposed to be only one liner. And when I say one liner, it's supposed to be like probably like 6 words, as I said yesterday. Again, I think 6 words is not like a hard and fast rule. You can probably like go to 7. But I think the idea is just don't try to make a whole story in the sentence itself. But also like assertion must be really, really short and crisp and simple. So I think a lot of times what debaters end up doing is just like in order to make it fancy, you end up complicating it so much that just by your sentence, I think the judge does not understand as to what you're trying to do. Do not do that. I think a simple case is still very persuasive for the judge as opposed to a complicated case, because as long as you have a complicated case, you're more likely to actually like need more legwork in order to prove that. You don't want to do that legwork. You want to do it like if you don't want to make your life that hard, I think just don't do it. But I think what you want is like just immediate attention from the judge as to what you're trying to prove, so that they can like note it down in their sheets. So even if you like probably spend 2 minutes in your reasoning, at least they still know as to what you're trying to prove, as opposed to like probably just figuring out as to what you're trying to do in your 2 minutes, right? Because notice, yes, the judges are well versed as to what the format is and what argumentations are, but also remember that judges are also humans, which means that their attention span is less. But what you actually want to do is that just by that one, like what you want to do is like make them listen as to what you actually want to tell. So make them note what you actually want to say, as opposed to things which are not as favorable for you. So you would want them to like note your assertions, and in order for making it like more making their lives easier, I think you would want to make it short because they want to note it, right? So make it short and crisp because it's easy to understand and follow. Now, again, I think it should be very relevant to the topic. I think if the topic is like about smoking and you tell them like randomly about XYZ, which isn't even related to smoking, A, they're less likely to jot it down. But B, I think it's just going to be really, really complicating like the entire debate. I think also like even if you think that you want to like run a very far-fetched idea, try to link it to what you're actually trying to like prove. So like probably like first the very nearest thing to the motion and then try to prove it with your reasoning and then probably talk about your far-fetched idea. Firstly, don't talk about the far-fetched idea because it's less likely that the judge will buy it anyways, right? So what you want from your assertion is short, it should be attention grabbing, and it's basically the flag of your argument. What do I mean by flag of argument then? It's just basically you telling that my first argument is X, Y, Z. That's all. So this is just a flag of your argument. Why do you always have to flag your argument? Is because, again, I think for a good structure, you need to tell the judge as to what your argument is, rather than just like having a full speech of like paragraphs, because it's just like really difficult to track it down then. So what you want is like, my first argument is that people are likely to be vulnerable if you like don't give them the opportunity to vote. I mean, that's just a bad example, but I think people are likely to be vulnerable. It's just like that. So my first argument is this. I have 5 reasons to believe in that. That would be your reasonings after that. But you have to necessarily flag your argument because it's really, really important for a good structure. I know for people who have done conventional debates, it's just very different because I have never used this structure when I used to debate in school, but I think it's important for WSTC speakers to do so, and even for parliamentary speech, that you essentially flag your argument. First argument is this, my second argument is this, and third argument is this. Any question with assertion though? No question. Then we move to reasoning. Reasoning is justification of your claim or assertion. Now, assertion is the claim that you are trying to prove, but as like reasoning is the roadmap towards your claim. So I said, this is what I'm going to prove, and now I'm going to prove it. How would you actually prove it? You have to do 3 things, and this is what you're supposed to continuously ask yourself while you're actually analyzing that argument. First, did I actually tell the judge as to what am I trying to prove? Notice when I said that assertion is supposed to be short, it's likely that it's still unclear as to what you're trying to prove because it's supposed to be short, right? A lot of times I think it's just like English, like general English that's supposed to come in 2 sentences, right? So what you would want is that you would want to first tell the judge as to what you're trying to prove, then go on as to like, why is it true? And then how will it implement, or how is it true in the first place? So I think just try to answer these what, why, and how, because oftentimes the not when judges are listening to you, if you're claiming something, the immediate question that comes to my head is that, why is that true? Or what are you saying? And how can it be possible, right? So all of these things you would want to actively try to like answer. I mean, I have seen debaters who actively, like in their speeches, say, why is this true? And then state, why is this true? Because it's easier for the judges to understand. And I think they're like simultaneously asking that question because then you grab that attention of the judge as well. So why is it true? How is it possible? What is the argument? I think you would want to answer all these questions. Just like fill in those gaps in your arguments. But practically, how is it possible? Is that 2 things. How many of you like writing your speeches on Google Sheet as opposed to like probably actual sheets in hand? Like Google Sheets first. Like, do you like Google Docs? Google Docs?
Yeah.
No,
Yes.
like okay. I mean, that's the best, like that's the best way as well. So what you should do then is just structure your entire sheet and keep it blank. So write assertion, and then colon, and then reasoning 1, reasoning 2, reasoning 3, and then why, what, and how, so that you're actively and very consciously making that, like filling down those gaps rather than like just like writing your arguments. Because the reason as to why it is important is that oftentimes not, the reasoning is in our head, but we don't tend to like deliberately or like deliver it to the judges, because like in the beginning of whenever you start parliamentary speeches or like WSDC, judges tend to tell you that your speech was assertive, you did not prove it, and you never understand as to why you did not prove it, because in your head you've already proved it, right? So what you would want is that you want to not let the judge tell you that your speeches are assertive. I mean, it's okay for the judge to tell you that your reasoning was bad, but don't let the judge tell you that your reasoning wasn't present there in the first place. I think this is the biggest like drawback for a debater. I mean, if you are a debater, you should know how to reason your claims. And I think you probably know that, but I think you just think that it's just too easy that like the judge would obviously know this. But the judge isn't there to like fill those gaps for you. Remember, the judge is a plain canvas. So think about like you telling or like you explaining it to a 2-year-old child, right? Like this is how you're supposed to give your like like your arguments. So if you're saying vulnerables are likely to feel bad, tell as to why they are likely to feel bad. How are they likely to feel bad? What, like on what scenarios are they likely to feel bad, etc. Just like paint the picture in their head as to what it actually looks like. This is what analysis is. But moving on, second thing, I mean, I think what you essentially also need to know is there are a couple of ways how you can actually analyze like the arguments. I think there is no like set of ways, but I can just give you examples of how you can do it. First is logical analysis. What do you think logical analysis could be? Like what could it be?
Providing the argument and then giving like actual logic or like giving practical examples for it.
Okay, remember that they're just reasoning, so you have to independently keep it different from examples. So then what would logical analysis look like?
Based upon the facts and what happens, what logical reasoning could be what is usually most likely to occur.
Things, okay, likely to occur. You would probably give them the likelihood of a particular thing. So you would give them logic behind consequences. So you would say that, hey, if you slap a person, it's likely to hurt them. I think it's just logic. Like things which are common sense, but you think it's not you think it's so common that you won't even tell them, the judges, about it. Even if you think it's so common, I think use it as logical analysis and just tell them that I think it's simple reasoning, as like simple logic as to why it's likely to be true, and then explain as to why it is simple logic. The second thing then is, I mean, another example for logical analysis could be just like, whenever you take opportunities from people, it's likely that you hurt them and it's likely that you disappoint them. What would it look like? It would look like taking away jobs from people who are already working in a particular company, or it would look like taking away reservations from people who are already taking benefits of reservation, right? So you're painting that picture as to why essentially it's true that, you know, just like it takes or it hurts people when you take opportunities from them. It's just basic logic and common sense. But you would still, but when you, in your statement, if you just say that, hey, whenever you take opportunities from people, it hurts them, it's just assertion. It's not a proof statement. So which is, I think, it's just necessary for you to give like simple analysis in terms of logic. The second kind of like analysis is an analogical analysis. Okay, so a lot of times you don't have direct analysis or justification to what you're saying. So what you would do then is just take example, and this is where example is coming into picture, but you're analyzing the example, which is why it's different from just giving examples. What would it look like? It's just you comparing one circumstance to the other and comparing as to why this circumstance and consequence of this circumstance is similar to what you're actually comparing it to. For example, if you want to prove that in order for you to learn, you need to experience it, or so in order for you to learn, you need to experience it, is like your assertion. Okay, how would you prove it? You would basically say, in order for you to learn as to how you want to ride a bicycle, you would actually have to practice riding the bicycle. Without that, you don't have the exposure to it, and therefore it's just unlikely for you to actually like learn as to how to do it in the first place. This is just you giving analogy to a circumstance and then proving that, listen, in order for you to like learn something, you need to experience it. I think this simple analysis could be used in different debates. For example, if you want to tell as to why experience is really important in life, or why experience leads to more merit in terms of your just like your general like resume, etc., but even for that matter, anything, right? But I think the idea is that you prove it by analogical analysis. But question for you guys then, if you have to prove the opposite, which means that in order for you to learn, you don't need to experience it, what would be your analogical analysis? Like you actually don't need to experience it in order to learn it. It could be silly, but it still proves it.
Like some things come very innately to you. Would that make sense?
Like, yeah, like similar like that. I mean, you don't essentially have to like go through it in order to know it. So just try to come up with a circumstance and then prove it.
Maybe when we were in online school, we weren't exactly experienced school, but we're still learning through Zoom.
But I mean, it's just like different settings. So like you learning in class as opposed to you learning in school is similar. Any other example scenarios? I've had people giving me examples of we don't essentially go to chemistry labs, but we still know that like if you react to this this particular element with this, I think that's what is going to be the outcome. Because people before us have seen it, so we can learn from experiences of others. So I think that was a good example that we could give you. So it's similar to what you said, but yeah, a different way of presenting it. I've given you a hint of what it looks like. Just tell me now. Yeah, there is nothing I can just tell you.
In order for us to feel something about a particular occurrence, it is not necessary that we go through it. For example, if we enjoy listening to music, it's not necessary that we have to go through a lot and experience it a lot to actually build
I
up
mean,
the
if you enjoy
enjoyment.
music, you've probably like listened to music a lot of times. That's how you know that you enjoy music.
Okay, so like if someone is interested in fashion designing and they can come up with really good clothes and other accessories related to fashion, they don't really have to go to fashion school for that. Some people just have that creativity in them.
I mean, I think it could work like immediately, but I think there are good responses for that. You can just say that, yeah. So I can just give you a very silly example. In order for you to learn that fire burns, you don't have to put your hand in the fire. You know it like because people told you that if you put your hand in the fire, it burns you. But also like in order to know that like wars are essentially bad, you don't have to go through the like wars, right? People know it through ways of documentaries. People have seen like experiences from past from a couple of people. They have like probably read newspaper, they have seen atrocities happening, etc. So that basically proves that in order for you to learn, you don't even have to experience it. If it is so like the impact of it is like extremely high. Okay, the last kind, and again, it's not exhaustive list, it's historical analysis. I think it's really easy. Historical analysis is when you take references from past and proof that if we do the same thing, it's likely that the similar consequence is likely to happen. I'll give you an example and then you're supposed to tell me as to what we can prove and out of that example. When USA legalized drugs, it led to opioid crisis, which means that a lot of people started consuming opioid, which is a form of drug. And also when I say drug, it's illicit drug. Okay. So it led to opioid crisis. People got addicted to it. People started consuming it even more. They started like forging prescriptions, etc. But also, then like the only outcome out of it was that people had to start rehabilitation center in order to come out of it. What can you prove by using this example from history?
Thus, we must ban it and not legalize or regulate it.
Yes, so like we shouldn't legalize drugs because if you legalize it, it could lead to XYZ scenarios. Good. So this is how you do it. So in history, you can just take examples from history and then you can just say that, hey, this is how, and remember, it's not just examples. So you're not just saying that, hey, for example, in 2008, I mean, I just don't remember the exact year, but I think in XYZ year, it led to opioid crisis. You're not just saying that, but you're also analyzing it. You're explaining the entire example, but you're also like linking it back to the present scenario and then explaining as to why the scenarios are similar. So why are the scenarios simple? I think people are likely to act the same way towards drugs because drugs is inherently addictive in the first place. The nature of drugs is similar. So I think you have to then make that comparative very, very clear in order for you to actually make it like historical analysis. I'll give you one more example, and then you have to tell me as to how you would prove it. Okay. If you had to prove that, do you know about allies of different countries? how
Yeah.
different countries form allies together? I want to know from the younger. Okay, Donna and Nora, do you guys know about it? So
No.
allies is when two, like more than two countries or like similar, when they are from similar ideologies, they come together and then they form allies. Basically ties with like countries. If you have to prove that Russia and China should not come together and it's bad for other nations, what kind of historical analysis would you take? Like if you had to take an example from past and then you have to prove to why allies are bad, what would you say? Do you guys read history in your school?
Not
Yeah,
yet.
we did social science, but
Like a
Okay.
little
not
bit of it.
exactly.
Do you guys know
Yeah.
about World War?
Sorry,
World War?
Not yet.
not yet. It's still on World War II. They're giving a brief about World War II about from a novel, but
Okay.
they're not exactly giving anything what happened.
Okay. Shishti, Karshita, I think then I expect you guys to answer. Siddhika?
No, I haven't done World Wars in
Okay.
school.
That's okay. What was World War II like between like
The Nazis and the Germans
and
and the Russians.
and was it like just one country or was it more than one country?
There were alliances.
The whole world. The whole
Yeah.
world.
That's why
So
it's called World War.
yes.
Yeah.
So that's logic. Okay. So I mean that's what I'm trying to prove. So whenever like a lot of like alliances come together and then fight, it's likely to like actually elevate the situation in such a way that like wars become world wars, which is why
Mass
even
destruction.
exactly. Good. That's what I was trying to prove. So okay. So you can give multiple layers of analysis and then okay, what do I mean by multiple layers of analysis and multiple kinds of analysis? I think multiple kinds, we have taken some examples, but now let's move to multiple layers of analysis. I think you can give multiple reasons in order to believe the same things. For example, you have assertion, but you have 3 reasons to believe in that. I think it's just very, very convincing for the judges when you give them 3 reasons as opposed to just 1 reason, because I think just like general bias and consciousness that, hey, I think this person has much more reasons to believe in one particular statement, but also B, even if the judge does not buy to one of your reasonings, at least they're likely to buy 2 reasons, right? So this is general probability. If they don't buy one, I mean, I'm going to give you 2 more reasons for that. I think that's just general understanding of it. So I always tell you that like use more than 1 reasoning, but also I think it's just not quantitative. I think even if you have like 1 good reasoning, that's still enough. But I mean, layers of analysis, but quality of layers of analysis. Just remember that. Okay. Just because you want to have multiple reasons, don't try to just make it like another assertion. So in your head, you have 3 reasons, but actually there are 3 assertions under 1 assertion. It's still not convincing, and the judges are not going to like buy it. So layers of reasonings, which means that give multiple reasons, multiple metrics in order to believe in one statement, but that also means properly analyze that 1 reasoning and then move to the second reasoning. Then how would it look like when you're actually delivering your speech? Is that my first argument is this, I have 3 reasons to believe in that. My first reason is this, my second reason is this, and third reason is this. I think this is how it would look like. I know you've probably not done it before, but it works really well in WSTC and British parliamentary. Examples then. Examples are just illustrations of your argument. So you just like try to paint the picture for the judge as to how and what it looks like, and why is it true in real life. So you can, and this is really, really important and similar to like just the like general rules for when you're making assertion examples. So when you make general like assertion, you're supposed to keep it short and simple. But when you make examples, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to use generic examples and generic examples only, which means that things which are likely to be known by most of the people, which means that I think it's just like answers to the question by one of you all from yesterday that can I take a survey or statistic, which I mean is percentage, but I think like, so it's the same, right? I think if you think that the judge knows about it and most of the people are aware about it, use it. So use generic examples only, which are most of the number of people. But I think the idea is that since judge is supposed to be an average reasonable voter, they will only credit your examples then, because if they don't know about it, they cannot cross-check your example, and therefore they're likely to not buy it, right? So, but also use examples which are true for most of the cases and not exceptional circumstances. I don't know how many of you all read chemistry, but that basically means I think you have a couple of exceptions in chemistry and elements, right? So you're not supposed to use the exceptions, you're supposed to the general rule about a particular thing. For example, how many countries have direct democracies in the world?
Can you repeat?
How many countries in the world have direct democracies, like good functioning direct democracy? Do you know what direct democracy is?
Yes, but not the exact number.
Okay. Do you know what indirect, like which kind of democracy does India follow?
It's a parliamentary democracy.
It's in indirect democracy, which means that you elect the leaders make the law for you. But direct democracy is you elect the leaders, but you also vote for the laws that are there, right? So you get to vote for your entire constitution. If majority of people do not agree to it, the constitution isn't going to be implemented or come into force. That's called direct democracy. You can't, in a debate where you want to say that, hey, let's make India direct democracy, and we would take manifest, like basically referendum for every single thing. And proposition says that, hey, we should make India direct democracy because direct democracy functions really well, for example, in Switzerland. That example particularly is a bad example because Switzerland is the only country which has good functioning direct democracy. It's just an exception, right? So it's not true for most democracies in the world, right? So you wouldn't want to use examples which aren't true for majority of the cases. I hope that's clear. Then I think what exactly counts as example is just general scenarios of you like giving examples, but also like statistics, research material. So research material, you can probably talk about like the things that I already told you. For example, using examples from countries, using examples from communities, schools. But I think the only thing, I mean, people tend to use personal examples, but it's not really convincing because one personal example could be countered by another personal example, but also personal examples aren't true for majority of the cases. So don't use personal examples, precedents, surveys, etc. I think precedents and surveys are supposed to be only used when I think the motion is prepared motion, because I think you wouldn't essentially know about it if it is impromptu. But what I actually want to say is it's not mandatory for you to use examples in all of the arguments, but what's necessary for you is to just have general idea of what the argument actually is, which means that even if opposition comes out and tells you that, hey, we didn't get any examples of what it looks like, I think at least in the next speech, you are going to give examples to that. But I mean, also, I think the idea is that examples are just like used for better understanding of the argument, not to actually prove the argument, right? Which is why it's just not the most important thing. Okay, I hope example is clear. Do you have any questions for examples?
Yes.
Yeah.
So if we give the examples of a certain exception, like you mentioned, Switzerland, and the other team does not catch a mistake and they do not rebut on that, so do we get the point for the example that we just made?
I mean, the judge is going to credit you for that then. I mean, yes, then no. Like it's not a bad thing to use, like then use such example. But I think a good debater against you, and therefore always assume the best case from opposition. A good debater is always going to question you on that, which is called cherry-picked example. So that example is cherry-picked. I mean, you have just cherry-picked that example in order to prove your point. It's not true for majority of things. But also, I mean, the reason as to why example is the most important thing, like not the most important thing, I think I forgot to tell you this, is that every example can have a counter example, and it's just then a whole game of like examples, counter example, example, counter example, and then it's likely that the judge only buys the examples that he knows as opposed to the examples which are more convincing. So don't like, which is why I think it's just very also like slightly risky to use examples which are not true for majority of the people. Okay, cool. Impact then, which is supplementary, but it's important. Impact is the implication of an argument, which means that what does it mean in real life, but also what are the benefits of it in real life. It means that how does it affect your stakeholder? Why is it likely to make the life of the stakeholder better? Or if you're proving a harm, why is it like likely to make the life of stakeholder bad or just worsen it? After each argument, establish the importance of your argument. So why should the judge care about the argument? Why is this argument the most important argument in the speech, in the debate, right? For example, and I'm going to take the example later, but I think just remember in impact, link it to the stakeholder that you have identified in the beginning of your speech. So my first argument is this, reasons, example, impact of this argument is this. So impact of this argument probably is going to be, for example, it harms the principle of democracy. Why should we care about principle of democracy? So we should care about principle of democracy because democracy is what gives several rights to people, but also if you undermine it, I think it's likely to also lead to several other forces consequences which people don't essentially want, etc., etc. This is why, as a judge, you should care about it because you're also living in a democratic world. Imagine if democratic principles were just openly shattered in such country, etc. So you would probably also want to make that emotional touch there because you would want the judge to actually buy your argument. Okay, that's the impact. Then let's take example. And this is a very, very simple debate. I think if the debate is about going to school is important, assertion is going to school helps in socialization. Reason, first, it helps you to know and interact with more people. I have not explained it thoroughly. It's just the heading of the reason, which means that you still have to give a good justification just for you to understand. Second, you get exposure to different cultures. You would probably then explain what the cultures look like. Probably you get to meet different people from different religions. You get to know about their festivals, their habits, etc. Practical in-person conversation with teacher and students helps you to form basic conversations, etiquettes, habits, etc. What would it look like? I think you still have to give more justifications, just general understanding. Then you have example, compare social skills of a person who goes to school and a person who has probably gone to online schooling or homeschooling, and then just say that just because the person is stayed just probably with their family and that one teacher who comes to their school, I think it's just very unlikely for the student to be very comfortable around majority of people when they're with them. But also other example could be study in Canada proves that schooling as secondary source of socialization. So schooling is basically the secondary source of your socialization, which means that after your parents, the only people who teach you a lot about the world is the school, which is actually important for you to get that exposure. This is what you do whenever you have. So this is how you would deliver your speech. You would say, argument one is that going to school helps in socialization. I have 3 reasons to believe in that. First, it helps you to know and interact with people. Second, you get exposure to different cultures. Third, practical and yada yada. Okay, cool. Next kind of justification, and it's actually really important. I generally do it differently, but I mean, I would give you a gist of it right now. Cool. Before that, do you know about trolley problems?
About?
Trolley problems.
No.
I'll give you an example. For example, there is, can I just draw? Let me check. I can draw. Okay.
I think I know this. Is it that one that there's a trolley going, there are 5 people and then there is one person?
Yeah, that.
Okay.
I'm saying way too long. But just know that, yeah, so there are basically this is a trolley, and then created. Okay, so the general path of the trolley is this way, and these there are 5. Okay, I'm only drawing 3, but there are 5 people here. Okay, imagine the general path of the trolley is that it's going to go this way, and all of these people are basically standing there. They don't know that trolley is coming. You can't shout. No provision of anything. The only provision is whether you want to pull the lever and change the path to one person. Neither can this person listen to you, neither can these people listen to you. If the general path was this, killing 5 people as opposed to killing 1 person, would you change, pull the lever and change the path, or would you not? How many of y'all would kill, let's say, 5 people? Which means that you don't do anything. You just see them dying. or you pull the lever and save 5 people's life and then kill one person? What would you do?
Is there a possibility that the 5
No.
people hold the cart from
No.
killing them?
No,
Like,
no possibility. Nothing.
Then obviously we'll pull the lever.
How many of you will pull the lever?
Yeah, we'll pull the lever.
Yeah, pull the lever.
Save the 5 people.
Okay, good. Imagine these are 5 workers in an industry, and then this person is a surgeon, a very expert surgeon, who has potential to save many lives. How many of y'all would now pull the lever?
Oh,
They
no,
can't
then.
hear you, so maybe
Nobody
you
can
can
hear you.
Yeah, so they can't hear you.
But-
So maybe you can take action in your own hands and maybe you can like stop the trolley.
No, you cannot. You can't stop the trolley. at
can
all.
the surgeon dodge the trolley?
No,
Then
So-
perhaps we won't pull the lever because we still have the surgeon then to the rescue.
so you would basically let 5 people die.
But the surgeon has the capability to save many lives in the
Might
future.
not die.
So are you going against utilitarianism? So utilitarianism is you saying saving 5 people as opposed to 1. So that's called principle. The fact that your morality changed suddenly when the person becomes a surgeon is what principle is. Whenever you have to justify something against utilitarianism, you use things like principle. So principle of responsibility. This person has like the idea or ability to go ahead and save many lives in later, which means that this person is responsible to save many lives later, which is why I would save this person as opposed to 5 people right now. This way you would basically justify your idea of why you want to save that person's life. But also principle of economy probably, because this person essentially contributes more to economy as opposed to 5 like workers together, because he earns more, he also pays like probably taxes as opposed to probably these 5 people who are working in unorganized sector. This is how you would justify it. But let's now do it this way. These are 5 workers again, and this one person is your mother. How many of y'all would save your mother as opposed to 5? I mean,
I'll save my mother.
yeah,
I'll save my mother,
generally,
yes.
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 You would
everyone-
want to save your mother. Why so? Because you are obliged towards your mother. Why so? Because they gave birth to you, they nurture you, they take care of you, which means that you're obliged towards your mother. You have responsibility towards your mother in order to save you. But also,
You
principle
do
of
this. Yeah, you do this against any other 5 strangers or any person of your
Exactly.
family.
Exactly. So why would you do so? Is because principle of reciprocity. So reciprocity is basically she gave birth to me. She gave me life. I owe back to her. I have to reciprocate the same thing, and this way I would save her. Good. This is what principle is then. For example, I think this is how I'm going to like actually teach all of these principles. First, for example, you're a police officer with a terrorist who has bombed 10 kids in a school. Okay. Now, and trigger warning, I'm sorry. Now you're torturing the terrorist in order to know whether there are further like bombs planted in like any place of the city. You now have to justify as to why you should not torture the terrorist. So you're currently torturing him because you want information from him, but you have to justify as to why you should not torture the terrorist. Just give me a second. I'll come back in a bit, but yes. Do we have any answers yet?
Yes.
Yes,
I
tell me.
think I have one.
Okay, let's do one by one. Siddhika?
So if a terrorist has bombed 10 children, so it is evident that the certain terrorist does not have any feelings. So if we're going to torture it and he's going to endure, so we're actually in a way increasing his capability to endure torture and to be more resistant to it. And rather than getting information out of him, it is of great possibility that it will trigger him and the other people who are with him, and it will give more of a reason to them to attack even or to plan even further bigger attack on a larger scale, which would
Okay.
harm even more people.
Would you like to give an example through a principle? Do you have a principle in mind?
No.
Okay. I think that's a fair justification, though. I would give you that. But if you have to use a principle against, what would you say? Nora, were you saying something though?
Yes, I was just saying that just like children don't like listening to no, they would do that thing. So if you torture somebody and if you like slap them, if you hit them, they won't give you anything. They won't tell you anything. They won't tell you any information. They will just like do the exact opposite, just like how children do it.
Okay. So you're basically saying retribution is not a way to get information from terrorists. Okay, that's a fair thing.
Also, like, since they're so cruel, they have actually killed 10 children. And like as you said, torturing them will not bring anything out of them. So, and might as well, in the process of torturing them, maybe they die, and that somehow like goes against the right to life, because they're still like not judged by the law, or there's no yeah.
I think that's fair. I would use it as principle of human rights and dignity, which means that every person, irrespective of whatever they've done, I think they deserve principle of human rights and dignity, which is why whenever like a person or terrorist is being incaptivated by army, human rights associations and they actively go ahead against it and make sure that their rights are protected.
And also there's one more point, that if a policeman is torturing a terrorist, he's all obviously, and he's bombed a school which 10 people died. So he's obviously powerful, and who knows if he has other people joining him and more bombs, because he's not telling the policeman. So
Okay.
instead of like torturing the terrorist, you should make a deal with him and ask him politely.
Make a deal with them.
Yeah, instead of torturing him.
Practically, that's what I think.
Yeah. Because what's
yeah.
stopping the other people who are with him to pull the trigger for the other bombs, if there are any?
Yeah, it might instigate the other bombers then.
Yeah.
Okay. I will also use principle of justice, which means that fair trial, because you're not giving like fair opportunity for the accused to be heard. Yes, the person has done wrong. What do you do wrong to him against him without even him being proved like guilty in the court of law? No, you would want fair trial to be against him. He's still in custody. He's still going to like appear in front of court, but you shouldn't torture him in order to get the information. But secondly, what makes you feel that just like him dying is just utilitarian? Because I think a lot of times like custodial deaths happen, which means that you're just assuming the terrorist is doing things by himself. A lot of times these terrorists are just indoctrinated. A lot of times these terrorists don't even know that they're what they're doing. A lot of times terrorists do have families and like children waiting for them, which is also like immoral for you to just do wrong to them in the first place. Just because they did wrong doesn't justify any wrong against them. That's principle. I hope you understand what principle I'm trying to talk about and why principles are important. Then let's talk about principle of responsibility. I think we already talked about principle of responsibility to a large extent. But for example, let's talk about, why do you think okay, you're a company owner and you have workers, you're making a good amount of profit. Why should you give the profit share to your workers?
Because you're the
not just
one
you. Because not just you who's working, your company and the people who are working for you are also working as well for the money of the company, for the betterment of the company which you're working for.
Nora?
because these people, these workers, they actually do very hard work. Because supposing you're like very famous and you're like a high firm, like supposing you're a law firm and you're like a very high firm, it's not just you, it's not only the managing partner who's actually going to get the money. I mean, they distribute it, but it's not the only person who makes the firm, it's the other people too. It's the employees and the workers who make the firm. Because you can't call a company with just one person. A company is a lot of people together.
Okay. So the idea here is you would use principle of responsibility. You as a company and owner of the company hired these workers. These workers actively work again like for you, and they work hard as what you guys said, which means that if they have contributed towards the profits, you owe back to them. You have a responsibility to give like the share of profit to them, which is why you should have good wages as opposed to bad wages. That's how you would just like justify that. Okay, principle of reparations then. In order for you to justify as to why we should give reservation to females in parliament, you would give example of principle of reparation. Principle of reparation is if a class has been oppressed historically, you give them some amount of benefit later and right now, because the class which has oppressed the oppressed class owes back to them and owes reparation to them, which means that, for example, as feminist movement, you could just say that males in the society, even if it comes at the cost of like cutting down some amount of like seats from them and some amount of wages from them, it's okay because it's reparation to females, because males were the ones who actively took down opportunities from females in past. They did not let them work, they did not let them like go out of homes, like education access, etc., which is why it's okay for us to give reservation to females. It also looked like probably giving upper hand to blacks in like African Americans in USA, because hey, like white supremacists have oppressed them from a really long time. It's okay if it comes to at a cost of like actually going against black white people. It's okay because you have done the same thing to white like black people for a really long time. You should bear the brunt now. Next, principle of just war. Principle of just war is when you try to like tell that hey, you should be ethical and you shouldn't torture people, you shouldn't do war crimes, even if you think it's just like a war and everything is just in like love and war isn't actually true. Because if it is true, I think it leads to multiple atrocities, which is bad. Then you have principle of agency and choice, autonomy, bodily autonomy. So you can use it when you have to by like giving abortion rights to females is important. Why the ability to choose to what you want to happen in your body is also very, very important, etc., etc. Then you have principle of democracy, why it is necessary for you to probably make sure that governments are being accountable, governments are listening to you, governments are like also helping you and like respecting your rights, expression, etc., etc. is also principle of democracy. So you have multiple principles like this in order for you to justify as to what we're actually saying is true, and this is why principles are important. It's also a kind of justification. All right, let's move to now this. The motion is politicians should be criminally liable for promises made during election. I would actually tell you later, but which principle do you think you can use here? There are multiple principles from last slide that you can use here. Did you understand the motion?
Yeah.
Principle of democracy.
Yeah, principle of democracy.
Yes, principle of democracy, yes. What else?
Principle of responsibility.
Yes. So primarily principle of democracy and principle of responsibility. Let's move on. So I want you to actually note this down and submit me a document which gives assertion, reasoning, and example. So for this motion on proposition, what would be your argument? What would be your reasoning for that argument? And what would be your example? So basically in the structure, assertion, reasoning, example, you're supposed to do this. Okay. This is an assignment, not right now. Next, this house would ban animal testing. If you had to rather support why we should have animal testing, like opposition, what would be the principle that you're going to use?
Principle of bodily autonomy.
Who has bodily autonomy?
And that would be on the side of like opposition.
On proposition, I can see that you can use body, like principle of agency, like animals don't have an agency, you're just taking like benefit of it, and you're just like testing anything on them, you're killing them, which is bad. Sure. On opposition, but you have to say that yes, animal testing is okay. I mean,
So in opposition, you can actually say that it's the humans who run the world, and if we do human testings, humans will be the one dying, and then the world will suffer. If we do animal testing, it's not like we're testing on all of the animals of a certain species. If something goes wrong, we know what to do in order to protect them in future.
okay. So I think that's a very good answer, because the common assumption or obvious understanding of the motion is that if you don't have animals to test on, you were likely to test on humans, because obviously AI cannot be there, robots cannot be there. So what's there is just humans. So the principle that you would use is, I think analysis from Siddhika is right, but the principle is called principle of human supremacy. Human is superior in terms of races, like race. So which is why I think it's okay for humans to be saved, if it comes at the cost of like actually animals being tested upon, because after animals get tested, I think it's then humans, so that it's more safer, like it's safer for humans and human species in general. This is what would be the argument. So I have given you 2 assignments today, which is basically you writing 2 arguments, but argument, I mean, assertion, reason, and example for proposition here, and assertion, reason, and example on opposition here. Okay, this is what you're supposed to submit to me by tomorrow in Google
You
Docs.
write proposition on this one, and in the ban animal testing is opposition.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that is the end of session today then. Cool.